Hey guys, welcome to another Game Explained discussion. I'm your host, Andrew Seegers, and this time we're joined by Ash Paulson to discuss our impressions of Metroid Prime Federation Force. So, let's get started. Alright Ash, so you just got back from WonderCon a little while ago, and you had the chance to play several upcoming Nintendo games, and among them was Metroid Prime Federation Force. So I thought it'd be good for us to sit down and talk about this, but I've actually played it myself too, a few weeks ago, or I guess maybe a month or two ago at this point. So can you tell us what you saw of the game?
Well, during the public show floor hours, I got to play, I think the planet's called Excelsior, and that's the ice planet. So I got to play like half of mission on that. I got to play, I got to walk around a bit, fight some regular enemies, and I got to fight the boss, which is called the Hive Totem, I think. So I got to do that, and then behind closed doors, I got to play another level, which was like a poisonous, kind of gassy type planet. I can't remember its name. It's in the video footage right now. That you're probably watching, but I can't remember exactly what the name is. But essentially, both missions felt somewhat similar, despite being on different planets. And I assume that there will be, multiple missions per planet. I'm not really sure. But yeah, so I got to play two different levels, essentially.
Awesome, yeah. One of the levels you played, the second one you saw behind closed doors, is the one I played a few months ago, I think.
Oh, okay, nice.
But the other one you played looked to be, I don't think anyone had played that before until WonderCon.
Oh, okay.
So, but I think it may have been the one that showed off on the treehouse last year. I could be mistaken.
I think it was, actually. I think that Ice Planet was one of the initial levels they showed.
I have to say, I'm actually surprised Nintendo didn't show me that one when they came by here, but that level actually looked a lot better than the one I played, and I don't know what your thoughts on it are, but I think it looks a lot better than the second one you played. So
I agree. I mean, from a visual standpoint, I didn't think either one looked bad, but I think for sure the ice level was a much better graphical showcase for the game, without a doubt.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way.
Yeah.
So, what are your overall thoughts on the game based on your short amount of playtime with it?
It's kind of exactly, it's kind of almost turning out exactly as I feared, which is I think this is going to be a pretty good game that ends up getting ignored out of spite by hardcore Metroid fans. I don't think it's anything amazing by any means. I think this is going to end up being something of a drop in the bucket, but honestly, the game isn't bad. Like, yeah, it doesn't fit Metroid in my opinion. It really doesn't, and I'm not a fan of the chibi art style in a series like Metroid. But, you know what, it's a fun team-based shooter. I'm definitely getting a Triforce Heroes vibe from it. And, it's not amazing, but it's not terrible. It's fine. I enjoyed it.
That's interesting, because I wasn't quite as up on it as you are. So, because I think it may come down to the mission. So, it's always hard. I mean, you can't judge a game fully based on, these short preview events.
Right.
But based on what I did play, it didn't overly impress me. I played a couple missions myself, including the second one you played, as well as a boss-type mission where you had to play a game of blast ball, basically. Shoot these ball bombs into these cannons that then launched at this attacking warship or something.
Oh, that's weird. Okay.
So that one, it was weird, but it actually was more interesting, I think, than the other mission, which the other mission I just really don't like in any way. Like, it's just a drab-looking environment where you're going through this industrial setting that doesn't look particularly great, doesn't have much to look at.
Right.
And then the boss battle is really almost a misnomer, because you're just fighting a generator.
Yeah, I mean, well, there were I guess there are two bosses in the ice level. There's the Hive Totem, whatever the thing was called, and then there's an actual, I guess more of a proper type boss called the Ice Titan. Mm-hmm. But even though that was more of like a regular boss because he actually moves around, he didn't move around that much, really. I mean, he was pretty much cannon fodder. He just, almost just stood there and took everything I threw at him. So... yeah, definitely the boss fights left something to be desired, and I could see the mission structure getting, kind of repetitive after too long, just because at least the two missions I played felt very similar. I mean, you had to go in, infiltrate this complex, do something there, and then essentially you fight a boss, and then in classic Metroid style, you're escaping before something blows up. So... it seemed to me that would be the general mission structure. I'm sure there will be other levels that slightly deviate from that, but it definitely did seem like that was the formula. That you're going to be, doing this short infiltration section, you fight a boss, then you have to escape with your life.
So to clarify, that's how both missions you played out, right?
That's how they both played out. With the Ice Planet, I don't believe had a time limit when you were escaping.
Okay.
If I can remember correctly, but the second one did. And I seem to remember, I can't confirm this, but I seem to remember one of the Nintendo reps talking about that being the general structure of the game, that there would be other timed escape sequences as well. So I don't want to say every level would be like that, but I do feel like you're going to see more of that than just the mission I played.
It's kind of weird because it really, in some respects, it actually does feel like, when you break it down, it does feel like a really scaled down Metroid. You have these small, somewhat maze-like environments, not really, but these where you do have to explore and find the keys or the items to move on, and then you have the escape sequence, of course. But the problem is, I think, or I don't know if you want to call it a problem, but the thing with Metroid is it isn't a small scale. I think like what makes Metroid is the fact that you have this pretty large interconnected environment. So when you scale it down, it actually loses a lot of that feeling, I think, which is fine. It's just that it does feel very different from a typical Metroid game. So it is interesting how they are capturing some of the beats of Metroid, but not the overall atmosphere, I feel like, or the overall feeling of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I'm still not convinced that this should be attached to the Metroid IP. I really wish it wasn't, because I think it would have a better chance of just kind of, it just kind of standing out as its own, maybe neat little thing, and we can all just move on. Like, I feel like this game is definitely getting more hate than it necessarily deserves, even though it's not amazing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, absolutely. I mean, the fact that it has Metroid in the name, let alone Metroid Prime in the name, just brings with it all these expectations. So I think it probably would have been better for it to not have that, just so people could look at it more objectively. With that said, though, I'm still coming from the perspective of I'm not a particularly huge fan of what I played of this game.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll say this. Mechanically, I think it's solid, but I do think, and this is something I've seen a lot of people notice online, and they're correct, and that it's very slow-paced. It's very slow, and it feels very clunky, and I think there's something deliberate to that. I don't think that that's not a hardware or a software failing. You are this Federation Force trooper, or this Space Federation trooper, whatever, and you're wearing this, giant, clunky battle suit of armor based on Samus's power suit, and you can tell like it's not sleek like her power suit. It is this really clunky, heavy battle suit based on it, and I do think it conveys that sense of realism quite well. You feel like you are this giant hulking battle suit of armor, and even when you jump, you feel the kind of the weight and the momentum with it. So I do think they got that part right. So the pacing that you see in the videos, in my opinion, is deliberate. Now, at the same time, I can see why that slow pacing is not for everybody, and I can definitely see why it's not for everybody when you're talking about a Metroid title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never doubted it was deliberate. It's just whether that's fun or not.
Exactly, yeah.
No, I have seen people defend the pace of the game based on what we've played and the video footage we've shown, with demonstrations showing how in Metroid Prime as well, Samus is actually a pretty slow character, and that's true. I think the difference is, though, in Metroid, the environments themselves were interesting. There were things to do in them.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's very focused just on... It's very objective-focused, right? You're just going objective to objective.
It is.
And there's not really a lot going on there. So I think that's why the pace stands out more, because you're just walking through... Like, in that industrial level, for instance, you're just walking through corridors. There's nothing to do in them but battle a few enemies and, look for other corridors to go down.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the controls overall? Because they're a little bit weird, because they are very Metroid-esque, but then it also introduces the free aim as well, which I guess is similar to Metroid Prime 3, using the 3DS motion controls.
Yeah, well, I don't recall actually using the motion controls. I use the C-stick to aim, but maybe the motion controls are disabled in my system, because I was actually surprised that I couldn't use motion controls.
So the way that works is if you hold R, then that enters free aim. So if you lock onto something, for instance, and you can hold R to then free aim, you can also use the C-stick. I'm not quite sure. There's different settings for it.
That's what I use. I use a C-stick, and I actually didn't like it. I think I would have preferred to use free aim. So they actually didn't tell me that there was free aim, which makes sense that there is. So that actually, I feel like, would improve my impressions of the controls, having known that now, just because the C-stick works, but it has an annoying tendency to... Like, as soon as you use the C-stick to aim where you want, like, as soon as you fire, your aim will go back to its default straightforward orientation. So you have to readjust every time you fire, and that's really annoying. Mm-hmm. But with free aim, you wouldn't need to do that. So I actually wish I had known that. I think the controls are generally pretty good, but like I said, the aiming thing, that was kind of a minor annoyance, and... I always felt like I wanted to be moving a little faster, just a little more swiftly. Like I just felt like the default walking speed was just a little too slow, and that kind of always bugged me. It didn't ruin the game for me at all, but it definitely kind of always bugged me. And I totally hear what you're saying about the kind of smaller, more objective-focused environments. And in that sense, I want to draw another comparison to Triforce Heroes and I guess Four Swords Adventures, just because it really does feel like those classic environments, but really, really pared down into these very objective-focused missions.
Now, what did you think about the teamwork aspect? Because it seemed to me, even though the game is teamwork focused, like in the game is a team-based shooter, it doesn't seem to come into play that much. At least, with you mentioning like Triforce Heroes, that game was very much built around cooperation.
Yeah.
You had to work together to get through those levels. Here, it kind of felt like you can do your own thing, which isn't necessarily a negative. It is just kind of interesting, though, that at least that's how I felt. Like, it didn't feel like you had to work together that much.
I mean, I think there are choke points. So, there are choke points where you do have to work together. Like, I in the co-op mission I played, on the industrial planet we were talking about, there are these elevators where you have to, basically all 4 people have to sync up and activate the elevator at the same time to move on. So there are choke points where you're forced to kind of get everyone together to move on. But yeah, other than that, I agree. It definitely isn't as teamwork focused that I saw as Triforce Heroes, because you're really only working together to fight enemies and heal each other. I mean, there is a certain sense of kind of strategy in the teamwork where each player can only hold a certain amount of equipment based on their weight. So, you want to have a certain player might want to bring in a bunch of healing items. So that can be the team's medic, where other people might want to bring more firepower. So there is a certain amount of kind of strategic teamwork to the game. Now, that said, nothing that we played in either mission was anywhere near hard enough to necessitate 4 players. Now, I don't know if that's down to just the demo's difficulty being scaled down, which often happens in demos like this. But yeah, it definitely didn't seem difficult enough to warrant 4 players.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think the missions we saw were early. At least the industrial one is... I think that might be even the first mission. I can't quite remember, but I think they are early into the game. So I'm sure they'll step it up. But you did touch on something there that I think might be a big part of the game, which unfortunately doesn't come through in preview events, and that's the ability to customize your character. Because obviously, that's something you're going to unlock as you go through the game. You can equip your character with different abilities before you enter a match, and then you can then choose... you then kind of battle... I don't know if they had this in your demo, but you're kind of like fighting for... what items you want out of a pool of items that everyone can choose from. Did you have that?
Yeah, we did have that.
Okay, yeah. Which I thought was kind of cool.
I didn't get to see much of it because, really we only had a small amount of minor weapons to choose from. So we had, like, missiles, like shock beams and freeze beams, and I think, like, a fire beam. And then, and those are all super limited use weapons. So you have your basic cannon. And then you have these, limited use special weapons, which you can, restock on by getting pickups in the actual missions. But, they felt very rudimentary. I mean, so you would bring your shock shot into a mission, for instance, to use on specifically marked doors, which would usually just get you a mod. Like they were basically, like, these power-ups are used in the most obvious ways. And you get more points if you use an enemy's weakness against them, which is pretty cool. Really, I think it's going to be more about the mods, which we didn't really get to see much of, or really anything of. But basically, these are, exactly what they sound like. They're mods, so they customize your character, and I assume they can affect things like the power of your gun, or the speed of your movement, things like that. But we didn't get to actually mess around with or equip any of these mods we found. So the only thing I can say about them, which I thought was kind of cool, is that it kind of has this, even though the game's co-op, there is a competitive element to it where no matter who picks up a mod in a stage, let's say every player picks up, 5 total mods at the end of the stage, just because you picked one up doesn't mean you get it. If you're playing co-op, whoever has the most points at the end of a stage gets first pick out of all the mods the players got, and then the rest go to the players who got second, third, and fourth. So in that sense, there is kind of a competitive co-op element to it, which I like.
Yeah, which is something Triforce Heroes was missing. It actually goes back to the older co-op Zelda games, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I remember thinking when we were playing Triforce Heroes, and I think we talked about this in the discussions about it, I actually missed that competitive element to it. So I'm glad that Federation Force kind of incorporates that in a sense. I just hope these mods really do affect gameplay more than your standard elemental guns, basically.
Right. That really is a question: is how much they're going to affect the gameplay.
Yeah.
So, what did you think of how the game looks? Because I've seen, I mean, everything about this game seems to be divisive, but the visuals seems to be high up on that list. What are your impressions of the visuals, both in general as well as the 3D effect?
Well, I hate the art style. Like I said, I don't think the chibi art style. I love chibi characters. I think it's a cool art style in games that are right for it. But I hate it for Metroid. It just doesn't belong for Metroid at all. And I mean, that's just never something that's gonna change for me. Like, I just don't see even in the cutscenes where you see Samus, like, in a window and they're talking about her, she looks chibi-fied and it doesn't look right. It's Samus, It's like Metroid shouldn't look like this. But that said, the graphics themselves, I think, have a nice polished look to them. It's nothing spectacular. There are some nice special effects going on. It's a nice looking game. I think it looks nice and polished. The frame rate's stable. But it's not something that's going to make you go, wow, necessarily, with the exception of the stereoscopic 3D, which I have to say is actually some of the best I've ever seen on the 3DS. It is truly fantastic.
I can totally see that. I mean, the fact that the Metroid Prime games already did a fantastic job of making it feel like you were inside Samus' spacesuit.
True.
I can absolutely see that playing really well in 3D, with having the visor up on the screen and then, all the action happening beyond it, as well as your gun being right there, right?
And they nailed that. They nailed that separation element of being behind the trooper's helmet with and seeing out of that helmet into the rest of the environment. And especially, actually, with the level you didn't play, the ice level, the individual snowflakes falling as you're walking around are all like rendered at different spaces in front of you. So it actually looks really, really convincing. And I'm really impressed with the 3D effect in this game, I have to say.
It's interesting. I mean, Next Level Games is making this game, and they did a great job also with Luigi's Mansion, Dark Moon, which also had which also made really great use of the 3D. So it's not really that surprising to see them, continue that with Metroid Prime Federation Force. However, the rest of the game, to me, just seems so at odds with the other games we've seen of them from the for Nintendo platforms. So I know you are more positive about the game than I am. So what specifically did you like about this game?
I just thought it was fun to pick up and play in short bursts. Like, I don't want to oversell it. Again, it's not an amazing game by any means from what I played. Like, I'm not rushing out to go out and buy it. It's not blowing my mind. I think going into it, because there's been so much negative hype surrounding the game, I wasn't really sure what to expect. And when I actually played it, I'm like, it's fun. It's fun to pick up and play. Look, let me be clear. I have played many worse games than Federation Force. I want to be clear. This is at least a decent game. It's not a terrible game by any means. It's not going to, wow your socks off, but, I've played many worse games. I think the negative hype is just a little bit overblown simply because it's not what people want out of Metroid, which I totally understand, but I don't think that should get in the way of people's, maybe opening up to the idea that this is a decent game.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no question that the amount of hatred lobbed at this game is definitely overblown. This game really does seem to be just absorbing all the negativity surrounding Nintendo in general. This is the focal point of all that energy.
Yeah.
With that said, I'm actually not convinced it's a decent game. At least it's not.
Wow,
it's not a terrible game. I'm not convinced it's a particularly great one either, or even particularly good one. So, but I do want to be clear. I need to play more of this game to say for sure. But based on what I played, I wasn't really a big fan of it. It wasn't terrible. It just wasn't that fun either.
Well, to bring up the same comparison we've been talking about, you didn't really like Triforce Heroes very much either, right?
I would say I liked Triforce Heroes. I didn't think it was great. So I had fun with it, but it's a game that I don't also need to go back to.
Right, and I think that's going to be kind of how I end up feeling about this. I mean, I ended up quite enjoying Triforce Heroes, but I don't need to go back. I don't need to go back to it. I feel like with Federation Force, I might kind of enjoy it in that same way, but just not to the same amount. I don't think I'm going to end up enjoying Federation Force as much as I did Triforce Heroes, but I feel like it'll be the kind of game where I'm not necessarily upset that I played it, but I don't need to go back to it either.
The thing about Federation Force, and again, just to be super clear here, we need to play more of this game to say for sure. This is just our initial impressions.
Yeah.
So these could completely change.
The Federation Force could be the game of the year.
It could. It's possible.
It could be.
But I do want to say that based on what we've seen, for as controversial as the Metroid license is applied to it, I almost feel like if it didn't have that license, if it were just a straight up shooter, no one would even pay any attention to this game at all.
And that's the catch-22, you're right.
It is, right?
Yeah.
I feel like if you stripped Metroid from this game, it would just come across as a super generic co-op shooter. Like
it would be another Codename Steam, except actually in a shooter instead of a strategy RPG, and no one played Codename Steam.
And I would actually argue that Codename Steam had more personality come through than what we've seen from this game so far.
Oh, I would completely agree. Yeah.
So, I don't know. This game is weird. I am encouraged by your impressions of it, though, and it might be based on the missions you played. Again, I think that ice one looked better than anything I played.
It was definitely better than the industrial gaseous planet for sure.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, I do think the ice planet was better. Again, I don't think this is going to be a game that lights anyone on fire, but I had a good time. Enough.
The ice planet at least reminded me somewhat of Metroid Prime. Like that's the one I can see. Okay, I can kind of see where they're going with this.
Yeah.
So I am really curious to see where the rest of the game and how the rest of the missions stack up, and if maybe if they do evoke the Metroid Prime atmosphere. Because if they can get anywhere close to Metroid Prime, like anywhere close, it could be a good game. It's just that I'm not sold on what I've seen, and it really does come down to just I don't know, for me, like just the core gameplay.
There is a chance that these mods will, introduce a nice bit of diversity to the gameplay. I mean, the different outfits in Triforce Heroes do kind of add a little replayability to that game. So hopefully the mods, whatever form they end up taking, really do kind of mix up the gameplay a bit and really make customizing your trooper fun enough that you're going to feel different enough from your friends, the friends you're playing with. So, we haven't seen everything this game has to offer yet. We've only seen one angle on it, and, I definitely want to play more of it before writing it off. But certainly, as a Metroid fan, it's not at all what I want. Like, I want to make that clear. I'm not saying that all these Metroid fans all this time have been wrong and they're overreacting. Yeah, the game isn't as bad as some people are saying it is just because it's not what they want. Right. But that doesn't change the fact that it is not what they want. And as a Metroid fan, yeah, I mean, this isn't at all what I would want.
I mean, I think, yeah, when dealing with this game, you really, based on what we've seen, you have to divorce it from the idea of it being a true Metroid game.
You really do. I mean, you just have to kind of, just tell yourself, hey, I'm playing a side story, a spin-off, whatever. Samus, I was promised multiple times. Nintendo's, I can say this, from the reps I talked to about this game at WonderCon, Nintendo's well aware of the perception of this game, and they were fighting tooth and nail to tell me many times, hey, Samus does make an appearance, hey, she's going to be in the story. I'm like, okay, that's cool. I mean, you don't have to worry about me going off in this game because I get it. I know what angle you're coming from. But you can put Samus in this game as much as you want, and it's still not going to feel like a Metroid game. Like, I'm sorry,
right.
I'm willing to take it on its own merits, and that's fine. But this still isn't coming anywhere near close to like a core Metroid game for me.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
like you can have a thousand Samuses in there, and it doesn't make it a Metroid game, right?
Yeah, especially when she's looking like that. When she's got the chibi art style. Like this isn't Metroid.
Well, any final thoughts at all, Ash? Anything you want to bring up that we haven't touched on? Like any aspects of the gameplay or any final parting thoughts you have before we finish it off?
The only thing I can remember is that the music was really boring. Like there almost wasn't music for a lot of it. I actually played with my headphones just to see, because I had my headphones with me. I wanted to see what the sound was like, and environmentally the sound is pretty cool. I mean, it's kind of got that ambiance to it, but I don't know, the sound really kind of bored me. Like, there really wasn't a whole lot going on with the sound or music. And Metroid isn't necessarily, Metroid's known more for its ambiance, too, than it is its actual soundtracks, but they usually strike a nice balance. Federation Force just seems to kind of go for the atmospheric stuff, but not really have any sort of memorable score to it. So, just something I thought worth noting, but the only other thing I want to say is I hope Nintendo does a demo for this game when it actually comes out, because I think this is the kind of game that people will need to sit down and actually try before they can actually see if it's for them. Like, yeah. I don't think that it should be written off just because it's not a Metroid game. I think there's a decent game underneath that, but again, we won't know that until we play the full game. I just don't think it should be getting quite as much, I'm never going to look at this game because it doesn't star Samus kind of hate that it's getting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely fair. I do want to try more myself just to see if, how it turns out. Because again, hearing your better impressions as well as the footage I've seen of that ice level definitely makes it seem, at the least, a little bit better than what I played. So whether or not that's enough for me to actually like the game, Verdict's still out. Well, it shouldn't be too long until we find out more, because the game is due out in late spring, so here's hoping we'll get to see it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's got to be almost finished. I mean, it feels like it's about finished. All I know is the first thing I'll be doing if and when I play the full version is equipping a mod that lets me walk faster. Because man, that feels so slow sometimes.
Okay, if that is a mod, that legitimately could fix a big problem I have with the game. So
I did like that you have a little side dash that Samus has in the Metroid Prime games. Did you notice that? Yeah, like if you lock on, you can still kind of do that little swift side dash that you could do in Metroid Prime.
And the very core controls are actually very Metroid Prime-esque. So
yeah, they are.
They did a good job capturing that, just everything surrounding it I'm unsure about.
Yeah, exactly.
Alright, and with that, I think we're about done here, so thanks guys for watching. If you liked our discussion, make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain. You can find links to them in the description below, which is a good way to keep up to date on everything we post. And of course, keep an eye on GameXplain for more on Metroid Prime Federation Force and other things gaming as well. Alright, catch you guys later. Bye.